Okay. Chapter 10, feminist theory. Okay. First point was brought up is it was not developed by just one person. There was a lot of people who kind of came together and helped get it going as a theory. One of those people are someone that you actually have studied about in other chapters, and that was Adler. The reason that Adler supported this theory was because he said that he definitely agreed that most of the stuff done to individuals was the damage of society itself. And damage from society needs to be a focus of this treatment. And when you read about it or you look about it, that's really where the focus is on society. And so depending on where you are practicing, that's going to be very varied, right? So kind of an example of that, and I really want some participation here because I want you to think about this. How many of you that are the primary female in the home with other people, I don't mean live alone, okay? I'm talking about people that don't live alone, I'm talking about people that have families to deal with when they get home, okay? How many of you that have families when you get home that are female found that taking on school was okay as long as you did not drop any of your other duties that you already had to do? You just had to figure out a way to plug it in. Show of hands? Thank you. Nothing was taken away. You just had to figure out how to find time to plug it in, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to come back to how these examples play into this. I just want to kind of get some mindset. Let's say you guys are a couple, so I can actually use you for this example. It'll actually work great. So Shanoa and Brandon are a couple. They both went through school together. Now, let's say that Brandon continues on with his current job, whatever that is, and Shanoa goes on to get her PhD. Okay? Now, at the end of those 2 or 3 years, however long it takes her, she gets her PhD. Then they have already discussed this. This has been the big long-term plan, right? She agrees that she'll go to work. Brandon's going to quit his job and work on his PhD. Okay? Tell me some issues that they will have as a couple with that plan.
When they switch roles in the thing, when she becomes the
Breadwinner.
main breadwinner.
Your role's trying to, like, I don't know. It's a lot of pressure to go, you know. I don't know.
Keep going with it.
Like, he's gonna quit his.
Okay, when you're in your PhD program, you're not working. Okay, you get to be home with the kids, but you got to fit in school there, right? Now, do you think that any of your family or his family are going to give him a hard time
They do.
because he's working and you're not?
They told me to quit school. Well, he said they said for me to quit school for some reason. I can't remember what it was. I don't pay attention. But it was like a. I can't remember.
Okay, but what will happen if when the roles switch, Brandon?
Well, they look at you as less than a man.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Because I'm the guy I should work.
According to who?
The cold system.
Society. Nobody else has. It's not written in stone, correct? And that's where the feminist therapy would say, you all are okay with this plan. This is a plan that you developed. So who says it's wrong?
Everybody else.
Which is who? I mean, what's the importance of them? Does that help a little bit? So when you think about the feminist therapy, the main focus of it is that it wants to take the idea of the only difference between male and female of any type, race, creed, color, is genitals. Biology. Biology gave you that sex as a male or female. That's the only difference. It wants to take everything else away. Because everything else is a label that was created by society. And that would change because you wouldn't have got that response if you'd been in New York. Wouldn't you think? If you was living in New York, would it have been a big deal that you were going to school and being supported by your spouse? No.
My aunt and uncle did. My uncle stayed home and my aunt made money because she made more money. Awesome.
But I bet by maybe some of his friends, he might have caught some flack. Depending on where they lived.
Yeah, I got a
Depending on where
cousin
they
right
live.
now. He's staying home, and his wife's working, but she's a physical therapist. She makes over $50 an hour, and she told him, you don't have to work, and he's staying home and homeschooling their kid. But last night I was talking to his brother, and his brother is just like, talking bad about him for not working and turning down jobs, even though the wife is bringing home plenty of money.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Right?
I'd like to know.
I would too.
I'd like to let him.
Yeah. If you notice, there's a trend where people are trying to change this. And they're using media advertising. Some of the washing machines and the dish detergents are showing. There's the one where the dad has got the little princess, and she gets dressed up as a cowgirl once a week while he washes the princess dress. And so you can show that he's like a primary provider of the little girl, and he's doing laundry. Before that commercial, can you think of one commercial where a male was doing laundry in a commercial? And now they've got the new, the new appliances where the man and the woman are using the appliances together. Before that, think about it. Where did you see it at?
Well, stay-at-home dads is becoming real popular too.
But it's being promoted so that it's more acceptable to society, and that's a lot of times what happens is things that we deem and label things negatively. We have a lot of issues with how media portrays women as supposed to be tall and thin and stuff like that. But if you look, a lot of this media is starting to help people unlabel people, starting to help you look at people with less stereotypes. So a lot of that has started changing. Okay, where are we at? Now there's specific principles that they talk about. And the first principle we already covered, that was about the biology. That when you talk to clients, helping them realize that a label has been created by society. Views are created by other people. The only fact is biology. It's the only true difference. Principle 2 is the understanding that when you don't fit in the mold that society created, that this is what you're supposed to look like in your label, that society itself can have a detrimental effect on that person. And the third one is more of a global stance, that if we can do a good job, whether that means in pieces, whether that means putting these techniques into play even in pieces, not as a theory overall, that politically things can change, one client at a time, that we can change society's views. And so, there was the comment made that it would be hard to stay in this mindset during the whole treatment, right? Is that what you said? And you're right. It would be, because unless it was specifically about someone being affected completely by a cultural stance or a label, and that was what they primarily were there for. But definitely this can be used as a technique or brought into almost any treatment, especially when there's some cultural issues there. Right?
I'd say this has got probably blew up more since the gay marriage thing. You know, like the rural areas, you expect it to be like,
It stresses equality.
It does. It stresses equality across the board. And I would say that people probably would be more willing, since everything passed, to maybe to go to therapy about it.
yeah, that's what I mean, like they're having a lot of internal struggle.
Right.
Like Chris, it was saying like, this was on the last semester or semester before I read like a high percentage of the homosexual population come from Christian households, you know, like there's Bible Belt. I heard that, you know, what kind of conflict that was called.
Yes. And that brings up a good point, because if you are treating that population, one of the biggest things that you have to always keep in mind is that no matter how much you're trying to support your client, you never out them. You always let them do that if they're a patient. You never are the one to out them. You don't push that, because it doesn't take a genius to quickly Google how much that results in suicide. Okay, so you always make sure that you respect a person's pace that they need to go at. Trying to see if it has the same technique section as I have in my notes.
It was basically non-existent.
Does it even have in this text a technique section?
It does. It's got,
I might have just went right over it.
I have to find it. Because what the section says is that there's, stuff from everything else.
Say again? I mean, one of the big things, the big overall theme is empowerment, right? You want to empower people and let them be able to overcome any kind of label that they've been given. There's been things that people have been fighting for years and years and years. And how many of you are familiar with the term glass ceiling? Okay. Does anybody not know what that means? Does everybody know what the glass ceiling means? The glass ceiling is a term that was given to the difference between male and female of equal employment, same title, same job description, and they did some research, and there was a phenomenal difference in salaries. And one of the things that like I've seen myself is, like, I had a supervisor and he was an amazing supervisor, he really was. But there was a comment made one time, because as a supervisor myself, when you sit in on sessions, and he was my supervisor, he was the one that always offered the salary that came from corporate, like what the range had to be. And I kind of commented about, like, how it was different, what was the difference in qualifications here, that kind of thing. And there was a comment that was made that was kind of like an assumption, that label, that societal label, that if there was a man, he would have been the primary. They wanted to make sure they could give him the highest salary possible, because he would have been the primary breadwinner, whereas if it was a woman, there was a secondary income from the household. And what a misconception, right? What a misconception. Because that can be true, but it's not a given, right? So some of the things that I found was a technique called liberal feminism. And it's basically just a focus on specifically for women, if you want to, you really want to, your main goal there is to work on regaining self-esteem, of seeing yourself as equal to other people. You can use things like gender role analysis to where you get them to play other roles so that kind of comes to life of how they view themselves. Because sometimes when we're raised in a culture, you know, like, I mean, how many things do you think you just don't do, but it's not against the law? You just don't do it because that's how you're raised. You know, and it kind of challenges those mindsets so that you can recognize things that are, whether it's your moral code or whether it's just the way it is because society says that's the way you're supposed to be. So its main purpose is to empower people and to improve self-esteem and self-respect, dignity. Cultural feminism. It focuses on how people are oppressed and devalued by society. I mean, and that one's a pretty simple concept when you think about it. Is there any race that don't have some kind of biased name attached to it? Yes, there's one. Give me one biased name for white males. Very good. You can go down the list, right? Somebody's got a name for everybody, right? But it allows you to have the ability to focus on how different cultures, different races, different people are devalued. Like they don't have as equal value of human life as other people. So that's the cultural. And then radical is where they teach people, it would be techniques used to teach people how to be more assertive and take charge and not allow people to put them in stereotypical roles or labels. And then it talks about, you know, one of the things like if you're in that mindset that socially, the social feminist approach is the more that you can incorporate this into whatever you're doing, then you are changing one life at a time, empowering one person at a time, and if you do that, then society over time will change. Y'all got anything to add so far? Tammy? You good? Okay, strengths and weaknesses.
You kind of have to consider, like, the woman, which I guess you report, though, the woman is living in even just a semi-abusive, what you think is abusive relationship. You know, she don't say you should get beat on. Then you just empower her to pieces, and she goes home and gets the crap beat out of her, and she got to stand on it.
Well, process that out. Think about it. If someone was truly abused, do you think while they're in that relationship they would come to this type of treatment? It would definitely be a good one when they got out of it, to not make the same mistakes.
I'm just saying, even if it didn't, I was just like, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I see your point, right? But I mean, I think that when you talk, you know your clients. If a person is allowing themselves to be there and isn't ready to go, you're not going to empower them to go and fight back. You're going to empower them that they have the right to leave. You're not going to empower them to go and put gloves on when they get home and get in the ring.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, I've seen it, like, living in this rural place. I keep saying that, but it's true. The stereotypes are true to it. fired up, Well, then, not long, I guess, well, it might have been the next day. She had called my grandma, he just about killed her. She went home all fired up. I'm not laughing at the abuse, I'm just saying it was not expected. Everybody just sat there and ran and raved, and then it ended up completely backfired, all that. So that's why I thought that is why I'm counting that. That's why I thought that.
I mean, I think that if I had somebody that was ready to leave and ready to handle stuff, that I would have contacted them with the safe house to leave and go straight there and not have to go home, you know? Yeah, but I wouldn't encourage them to take anybody on physically.
But I'm just saying that's what I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
Just sit there and get some power, and I don't know.
But that's a good point, though, because the point is that you would want to make sure that safety was still a concern. You know, you would want to monitor that if that was the situation. You want to make sure that there was a safety plan and that you didn't allow something like that to occur. Yeah. So one of the strengths is that it's not a hard concept. I mean, you know, there's not a bunch of techniques you got to learn. You know, a lot of things you got to practice. You know, it's an empowerment strategy. You don't have to have like any kind of specialization certification to say that you can provide this. No extra training. It can be incorporated in multiple therapies. It can work well with a lot of different populations. It can be used with a lot of different cultures and populations. It's also a very good form of understanding, especially when you're dealing with multiculturalism.
When you were saying the other cultures, would this be one that you could use in the Japanese culture though, or it's mainly a man domination of women?
Well, I mean, I think it would depend. I mean, one of the things that you don't want to do is like, if you're in a culture where women walk behind men, you don't want to pull somebody out and tell them they don't have to do that. If that's their beliefs and they're okay with that, then there's not a problem.
If they're seeking it, I get what you're saying.
If they're seeking it, then that's when it would be appropriate, because you would have to realize that it's just a cultural factor.
Yeah.
Right. The weaknesses. One of the weaknesses that I've always noted in here is just the word itself. People hear the word feminist and they think of like some big movement to where, you know, burning the bras and men shouldn't open doors, you know, and they think about anybody else being able to be provided the service, but just, you know, women that want to be equal to men. And that's not what it's, just the name itself turns a lot of people off from it. It really does. You hear that, you're like, I don't want to do that, you know, because it's an automatic assumption. The second thing is, if it would be hard, if this is what you were looking for, it would be hard to find it, because it is the way it is. It's not a big, you know, like specific, long drawn out therapy. How many people would actually label themselves as a feminist therapist?
Well, like you're saying, the name in itself is going to turn it.
Which is probably why people don't label themselves to that, right? They probably don't even mention it in treatment. They probably just talk about multiculturalism and diversity, right?
That's something that the video was talking about, integration between cultural therapy and feminist therapy.
I'm surprised you could hear it. It was a pro, but it's also a con. It doesn't take any specialized training. And because it doesn't take any specialized training, then the issues with that is, one, everybody might have the same goal down here at the end of the empowerment and unlabeling, but how everybody gets from point A to point B could be totally different, how you get there, right? So that's one of the downfalls of not having a specialist or a certification or specialized training to be able to provide it. Two, because of that, because there's no, this is how you do it, there's no direct structure, it makes it incredibly difficult to measure, test, assess in any form or fashion, to research it. So those are some of the, you know, downfalls of it, to get accurate research. So the inconsistency from person to person, how it's gonna go. But it's also one of the good things because you can do it your way for that client. It doesn't have to be that structured, so. Those are the pros and the cons. Do I have anything else to add that you feel like I didn't cover?